Thank you. I apologise I don't have any fancy slides like everybody else has. I've just used some real pictures of the person we're talking about. I've been invited to tell you about, my husband Michael is here today, so I'm sharing this, it's half of his fault, about our daughter's living situation, where we as a family are now the providers. It's a rather unique situation and probably pioneering as far as care for Prader-Willi syndrome goes, and I think it certainly breaks the mould and probably most of the rules as we know them. And I actually wouldn't necessarily recommend this for everybody with Prader-Willi syndrome. A lot of people, they're all very different. Our daughter seems to be quite capable in a lot of areas, but of course, knowing Prader-Willi syndrome, it's quite deceptive. Anyway, and I'd like you to think about, there might be some things that we do that other people could use in their lives and the lives of their children. We're very fortunate to live in a beautiful seaside town called Picton in New Zealand. If you haven't been there, you really must. It's at the top of the South Island. It's a very small town, and Hannah was born and grew up there, where everyone knew and accepted her. Now I'm going to cut through the next 17 or 18 years, which by then were hell, and somebody was going to die in our household, so she needed to move. And she wanted to find somewhere else to live. And of course, living in a small town, we don't have any residential options or day program services or anything like that available to us. So she went to live in a small city about 2 hours drive away, which was the first of many placements throughout the countryside. None of which were very successful, I'm afraid to say. And over the next 4 years, she had 3 behavioural management assessments. She'd moved house 3 times. She was kicked out of polytech courses and day programs, banned from shops for stealing. She gained almost 30 kilos. She had only imaginary friends, and she was a very unhappy and, I might add, unpleasant person. To be fair, I will say that most of the disability support providers who worked with her had never really worked with people with Prader-Willi syndrome before, or someone with as much ability that Hannah has. So they did give it a really good try, and I don't think any of them will forget her. Now, after living in the North Island, sort of kicked out of the South Island and moved to the North Island no, it wasn't quite that bad, but it sometimes feels like it. But after living in the North Island, which is a long way for us, you have to cross the straits and a few hours further north in a car, it's might as well be in Australia. Having lived in the North Island for 2 years, she indicated she wanted to move back closer to home, and to be honest, it really wasn't working, what was happening for her, and I found I was exhausted trying to keep the whole thing afloat. She wasn't happy, she wasn't going anywhere, no progress was being made, and we kept saying to ourselves, oh my God, is this it? Is this as good as it gets? And it wasn't good enough. And family's really important to us. We missed her, we wanted her home. I mean, now the children have all grown up and doing other things, but that's her environment. Now, there has been a recent new initiative. I'll just flick through a few other photos as we're going so that you know who we're talking about. That's Hannah, obviously, and that old woman in the middle is me. There's been, every time I see a photo, I think, oh, who's that god old woman? There's been a recent new initiative in New Zealand called individualised funding, or IF, you might hear it called. Now, in the past, a person's need, whatever that might be, was assessed, and levels of funding, dollar signs, is allocated to that person. And with this money, you as a family would choose a registered provider, who we've heard from a few today, who would be paid to provide the support your family member needed. And in most cases with adults with Prader-Willi syndrome, this is residential placement. Now, depending where you live in New Zealand, you might have quite a few places to choose from, or you might have very little, like us, where you have to go further from home. And that's not ideal. When people get moved away from their home and their community and their family and the people they've grown up with, it wasn't perfect. So this new IF initiative was developed to give families of people and people with disabilities more choice about where and how they live. So you get to choose where you go and who you pay and what they do. I also think it's a cost-cutting measure on the government's part, but I think it's going to be a very effective one as well. So that money allocated now goes to the family of the individual who can employ their own staff, plan their own support program. Yeah, and that's what we decided to do with Hannah. Mike, you're part of this. It was nerve-wracking, very, very nerve-wracking, I will tell you. I'll go into that a little bit more. Anyway, the new assessment that, to accommodate this, new needs assessment that was done, resulted in a package of approximately 50 hours a week, 25 for vocational or daytime support, and 25 for everything else. And in October 2013, Hannah moved back to Marlborough into a 3-bedroom house with 2 other people and her cat, Sophie. Now, one of the other people was a young lady who also has a disability, not Prader-Willi syndrome, similar age. In fact, they knew each other from school, so that's lovely. And Amy also has her own support at a different level. The other flatmate was a paid live-in support person, and I will use the individualised funding to pay her to live-in support. We installed biometric fingerprint locks on the fridge and pantries, so everyone except Hannah had access to these. And Hannah has her own small fridge where meals and snacks are stored daily. Now, the role of that live-in support person was to help with meals, household management, social opportunities and transport at times, and various things. You know, it's a blank canvas at this stage, but we thought, okay, this is where we're going to have a go at it. The daytime is covered by a supported living agency who work with her as about 20 hours a week, and this mostly involves being out in the community. Most of their work is outside of the house, so that's her work, her exercise, just covering things like if she had an appointment with WINS or budget planning. Whew, God, thank God, yeah, they do budget planning. Believe me, they earn their money. Meetings, anything else the day-to-day stuff. Now, this concept was a whole new landscape for us, and honestly, from one week to the next, it's like, oh, what on earth have we done? I was really nervous about the whole thing. Fortunately, I have my family behind me who, even, it is rocky, it's still rocky, but they kept saying, this was the best thing, this is good. Despite all the headaches, this is good. Now, over time, I'll just flick on another photo. This is some of the things Hannah, this is why Hannah wanted to come home. This is her life. It worked reasonably well for a while, but that live-in person burned out and the wheels fell off the train. I'll use everybody else's terminology here. And realistically, it probably wasn't the best mix. They get on well, but not full-time. But it lasted a year, and by then the whole team, everybody that was involved with Hannah, had a good view of what was working and what was not working. And we were able to reassess where support and it was needed. And what we did, we took on a few more other staff, and that person's role was a little less, which she was quite happy about, but we had more people to share that role with. Now these people are paid to support and come in and work with Hannah. Well, it varies, 2 to 3, sometimes more on the weekend, hours at a time each day, outside of the day support. Now, the most important change that I made was I employed a service coordinator, because I just found that it was me, or, us, but me, who was having to deal with a whole lot of stuff. So I employed a service coordinator who oversees all the details. And the various day-to-day issues. And I call her my fairy godmother. She's wonderful. And Charlie is so good at what she does. It's only about 4 or 5 hours a week. And in this role, as I said, I get to be mum. She does. I'm not the boss. I'm not the person that will get you fired. I don't have to deal with perhaps roster. She does the rosters and sorts out any if someone can't make it and things like that. I don't have to try and sort out all the problems, all the crappy little rubbish that Hannah can create. And as a result, after 18 months of ups and downs, Hannah is still living in the flat with other people, and people she likes, people who have the right temperament, shall we say. And the people that are working with her are still with her after 18 months. I think that is quite telling. They help her to be involved with, she does lots of things. She's got, I intended to take a whole lot of photos of her doing things, but we all ran out of time. She's too busy and I was too busy. So she has a paper run, she goes swimming, she's a potter. Hannah's a wonderful potter, she's an award-winning potter. I'll show you some photos in a minute. Aqua aerobics, gym pottery. Her meals are planned with her and provided to her to access at any time. She actually doesn't have hardly any involvement with meal planning, and that works well. And she and the other two ladies live in a lovely suburban house, not too close to the shops. They pay rent, they have Sky TV, internet, they grow vegetables, and all those sorts of things that everybody else does. Compared to where she was living before, where she couldn't even use the phone if she wanted to. It was so, she was constantly in trouble. It was so punitive. I found it so frustrating. So now Hannah is back in her own community, where she is known and she's understood. And we, Hannah and our family, we have a say in what happens in her life and who works with her and what they do, what it looks like. Nothing is done about her without her. Hannah's very big on her rights as a person in the community. Now she's learning about her responsibilities of being a community member. That's a biggie. That's a real biggie. She lives near her family. And she's waiting patiently for nieces and nephews like the rest of us. She's had the opportunity to spend time with somebody. I couldn't have planned this part. She's met a gentleman. Here's my award-winning potter. Oh yeah, that was in the original part. And his name is Owen. Now Owen's a good 20 years older than Hannah, but they are very, very close friends. I've always wanted somebody meaningful in Hannah's life who would accept for who she is, and she's found this person. Owen's an orphan. He also has an intellectual disability himself. He's an only child, and now he's got a new family. He's part of our family, and it's just lovely. So I'll just wind it up to say this has been an interesting challenge and adventure. We've had plumbing leaks, as Scott tells you about, Scott mentioned earlier. But I think that's life with Prader-Willi syndrome anyway. And when I was thinking about this presentation over the last few months, I was thinking, it varied from 1 week crisis to the next. 1 week I'm saying, Christ, I'm going to tell them, whatever you do, don't go there, to the next week saying, you know what, this is really awesome. And it is. Most of the time it is. We're watching Hannah mature into a young lady who is living in her own house. She's earning a little bit of her own money. She's pursuing her own interests. She has choices. She's not skinny, but she will be. But she's safe and she's happy. In fact, she's radiant. And what more can you ask? What more does a parent want for their child? Thank you.